So welcome everybody to the workshop, Central Terminology Server for Medical Informatics Initiative and the Network of University Medicine. And we will present the actual state in this year, what happened last year, what are our experiences. And we have a program, an agenda you see here. And later on in my first talk, my name is Josef Ingenerf. I will present myself on the next slide. Later in this talk, I will go into this program a little bit more in detail. So let's start with the module 2B project, SU-TermServ Service Unit Terminological Services. This little project started almost 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago. And we are partners from Cologne and Hanover and Lübeck, you see here on this slide. And you can also get much more information on the website that is mentioned on this slide. There are a lot of activities we will not go into details in this workshop, but let's say a few words about this project. This project is about the provision of terminological content of vocabularies and services, especially by using the central Ontoserver in Cologne. That's the job of our partner in Cologne. And the content of this Ontoserver is something that we call source of truth that can all partners fix on to do their job. For example, especially in data integration centers that are dependent on an access either online or offline. I will go on this topic also a little bit later. But we have some other partners like the FDPG project that is dependent on the content, on the vocabularies for generating the search ontology to do the feasibility queries on the well-known platform for researchers. So many partners are there that we work with together. Okay, and what else is important? We have some collaboration activities, especially the task force terminological services as part of the working group interoperability in the medical informatics initiative. We meet regularly with other partners discussing what's important for them, what issues are important to deal with. But we have also meetings with other module 2B projects regularly every 2 months, let's say, to have a better picture how we can fit in the infrastructure that is built for getting the idea of data integration centers and making available all the patient data of making that possible. And our project is only one, from our point of view, important part of that picture. And there are other relationships to BfArM. The BfArM is, as you, I think, know, responsible for the most important vocabularies, especially ICD-10, German modification, and OPS, the procedure classification, and others. Also responsible for distributing SNOMED, and we work together with them, especially because at the moment it's very interesting or very important because they are going to provide a national terminology server, but Joshua will go into this topic later. And we have other relationships to other HL7 working groups and so on. And there are other activities, I put them under others, like the Terminology Server Challenge last year, to broaden our view to alternatives to Ontoserver, there are, of course, other ways of doing our job, and we dealt with that topic on this challenge. Okay. To go a little bit, but just a little bit into detail. Oh, that's the wrong presentation. Let's skip the other one. Sorry for that. I missed it to do it in the PowerPoint. So now here I'm. We had this kind of talks 2-3 years ago already, so I will not repeat everything, but I like this view on data models like you see here on the right. It's from the core data model of the Medical Informatics Initiative. I can also take other profiles from other activities you see here, Gecko, medical information objects, and so on. But we will deal with, of course, the core data set of the Medical Informatics Initiative, but the job is the same. And this example is from the Basis Modul Labor. It's a lab test specification. And as always, on Simplifier, those FHIR packages are provided. That is our starting point. And in this FHIR packages, there are a lot of profiles like this one with bindings to lots of value sets. That's the way FHIR profiles are built. And these value sets have codes in it that, again, are from code systems. And value sets and code systems, I go into detail later, but why it's important, because you need those value sets and those codes for structured data entry, for mapping from proprietary data, for example, laboratory data to LOINC and so on, for validation of codes in your ETL processes, for federated data queries I mentioned already in the FDBG portal, for analysis of integrated data. And you always are very, very dependent on the terminological resources. And for that, you need terminological IT services to deal with this binded value sets. That's the starting point for our job. So looking a little bit deeper into the FHIR terminology module, you have this, not all, but this most important resources like code system, where all the terminologies, classifications, ICD-10, SNOMED, LOINC, ATC, and so on, hundreds, are provided as FHIR resources, code system in this way, like this example from BfArM, the ICD-10 germ modification. It's a JSON file that conforms to the specification of FHIR code systems. And then you have the value sets where the codes are selected. And value sets are provided either explicitly by enumerating all codes into the value set, or it's defined implicitly by filters, and this includes statements to say, okay, I want all values from, let's say, SNOMED that are childs from the SNOMED codes. And later on, those value sets have to be expanded. So somebody has to provide expanded value sets when they are provided, and they are often provided implicitly. And at the end, those value sets are also sources from concept maps, and concept maps are also provided as a third FHIR resource that's important, especially in local environments, in data integration centers that have to do the job of translating based on concept maps. So that are the main resources. And on the other side, we need services that is also defined in this FHIR terminology module. And a few of them are shown on this slide just to have a short inside the lookup service to look up codes from code systems, the subsumes operation to test if two SNOMED codes are subsumed by each other, the translate, a very important translate service dealing with concept maps, and also very important, the validate service to validate if those used codes are really in the right version of the right code system. So having said something about this fire sources and services, I finally will come to the architecture or the picture of the Ontoserver that is used in our project and that is maintained by our colleagues in Cologne, and that is the Ontoserver. The Ontoserver you see here with his databases and indexes to do a very efficient job. And this Ontoserver is provided by 3 APIs, application programming interfaces, the Fire API, the administration API, and the syndication API. And in order to access the APIs, there is a further level of access control. And on top of it, a lot of tools are provided by CSIRO. That's a company in Australia that provides Ontoserver. So that is a basic outline of what Ontoserver is structurally is about. And now I want to go through the agenda from today to say, okay, the first session now I'm speaking about is yes, about the basics, about this outline and this fire resources and operations. I told you a little bit. And what will happen in the next sessions? In the next session, we will have a talk from Adnan. And in this session 2, he will go into more detail, speaking about the internal aspects of Ontoserver, about administration, about implementation, setting up Ontoserver, but also, of course, about syndication. Syndication is a special mechanism to enable other local terminology servers, let's say in data integration centers at other sites, and having a syndication protocol, a syndication mechanism to be synchronous, to guarantee synchronous content from the content in the Ontoserver, to be as the site likes. It can be parameterized, it can be fitted to the needs of each site to have a synchronous content. When something is uploaded here, it can be replicated on each site. Okay. Adnan will tell us about the possibilities of Ontoserver, but in the third session, we will speak about first onboarding discussions we have with partners who are interested to use local Ontoserver implementations at their site, and to use this syndication mechanism in the way I told you before. So this is what I call the online access to needed terminologies each site by using the APIs from Ontoserver. But as we know from history, there are some others who will not do it for some reason, because also it costs a little bit money to install the local Ontoserver variant. So that's the reason why we, and that is the second talk. I come to it later, but the second talk is about Bettina Uliczka, and she will say something about an offline provision by using the data sharing framework that is created in the Medical Informatics Initiative, and that is available as all sites of the Medical Informatics Initiative. And because this data sharing framework is available and all the software is installed, it might be a good idea to have the content and made it available by additive tooling to take the same way of providing patient data, and in this way do it analog for providing terminological content to each site. So that's very interesting what's going on at the moment. But both this offline and this online access to terminological content is dependent on this talk of Joshua about another very heavy tooling called Babelfish tool, or whatever. He will talk about it later, for preparation content. And this aspect is so important that I want to speak about it only shortly. This preparation topic has to do that we gained experience after years of uploading versions of resources to Ontoserver. And yes, it becomes clear that there is an urgent need for quality improvement. If you do it years for years and you have thousands of resources without any constraints, you get into messy resources. And so the need has to do with these topics, that we become aware that these core data sets, and there are a lot of them, basic, what they call in Germany, Basismodule and Erweiterungsmodule, lots of them. And what we become aware is that there are lots of value sets and code systems in Fire package that are missing. Yes, people specify a lot of data models and say, okay, there's a binding to value set XYZ, by XYZ are not existing. So what to do? So we have to discuss with them how to make available also those value sets and code systems that are needed. And if we come to that topic, the original sources, even the original sources of medical vocabularies XYZ are not available as a Fire coding system. So the vocabularies are available, but not in that format that we need. And if you have more and more modules, we identify apparently similar value sets in different core data models. So it's becoming more and more complex. But not only the value sets and code systems as such, but also the content going into detail, the harmonized use of metadata, let's say properties that are used to describe the content, as the very different ways of vocabularies are described just with these properties, and you can do it in several ways, and you have to decide how to use metadata to describe all those resources, and you have to do it in a harmonized way. And they have to conform to the naming conventions that we defined last year. And you have to guarantee that those naming conventions for metadata are fulfilled and are correct. And even not only the metadata, the data itself, the terminological data itself has to be improved. Let's say, for example, the displays that are provided to describe the codes that are not always available in a proper way. So that has to be improved. And also very important, the implicitly defined value set have to be expanded. All the SNOMED codes that are defined implicitly have to be expanded to provide it in an expand way to the local sites that have to work with those value sets and are not dependent on getting any API to do expanding at a local site. So all that jobs have to be done, and I think especially Joshua will to come to those issues later on. And the last slide, We have, of course, the last hour. It's 1 hour. We have 2 hours talks and 1 hour from 12 to 13, from noon to 1 p.m. for discussions. So that's all for now. And have your questions. I hope just now I talk quite a lot. So I would like, if there are not urgent questions, I would to refer to Adnan. So I will close my talking and ask Adnan if he can start his talk, session 2. Yes.
Hi everyone. I hope you guys can see the presentation. Perfect. Let me see, where is my screen? Okay. So thank you so much, Josef, for such a brief overview of the ontologies, and especially the source of truth title. That was amazing. Yes, regarding the service modules the Ontoserver have, I will probably touch them a little bit, how we have set it up, how one can access. So this is the agenda for my presentation. It's divided into 2 sessions. In the first session, I will talk about Ontoserver, what it is, what are its features, abilities, what services it provides. We'll talk a little bit about interoperability, syndication, and I will also mention how it is deployed in Cologne and what are our experiences over the years with the Ontoserver, and how we can further improve it and make it more usable for everyone. So let's start with the intro. So basically, Ontoserver is a turnkey high-performance HL7 terminology server. So it's conformant to the standards of HL7, and it's a file server. It provides you, it basically plays a critical role in managing and integration. Let me turn the video off because my computer is getting crazy. It's getting stuck. Okay, that should make it a little bit better. Hopefully. So yeah, sorry about that. It's a technical thing. So for this Zoom, sometimes it causes issues with my computer. So yeah, what is Ontoserver? It's basically terminology server, which is developed by Cyro. They are based in Australia. I'm confused with this. Okay, that is fine, because I have 2 screens and the presentation is messed up. So yeah, and it's basically, as we mentioned, it supports all the operations, file resources, and majorly it provides in-depth support for SNOMED and Loin code systems, and this is its main feature. Basically, the Ontoserver is it gives us accuracy and consistency for the use of clinical terminologies, and it enables us, basically the healthcare providers, to efficiently manage and utilize terminologies such as SNOMED and LOINC. Plus, it also improves the data quality by enhancing patient care, ensuring the healthcare professionals have access to precise and standardized information. So that is like the main purpose of the Ontoserver. It's pretty powerful Ontoserver. It has very strong features. Basically, it provides fast and precise search capabilities, which I will later show in the demo. How you can search through for certain codes and for certain conditions. More maybe I think Josef might later on explain them further, but I will show the capabilities of the Ontoserver. It's Fire native, so basically it ensures seamless integrations with the other healthcare systems in facilitating wide range of fire operations. As Josef mentioned about the expand operation, the validate operation, subsume, and the lookup operation. So these are like the main, it basically supports all these operations. And then main feature about one can say, as it shows in the second bullet point, that it provides deep integration with the SNOMED and LOINC codes, including support of multiple versions of the SNOMED expression constraint language, ECL. Mostly probably you guys might be familiar with, who have worked with the terminologies and ontologies before. Basically what it does, it allows us for making actually detailed and precise clinical data representations and querying. So that's the ECL gives us this ability. Additionally, what we can say is Ontoserver leverages description, logic reasoners like SnowRocket and ELK to handle complex queries and inferencing. Since SnowRocket or ELK is not implemented in Cologne, so we will not talk about it in detail. But just to know that there are some features that you can also perform logical reasoning on the Ontoserver also. Then we have APIs, which Josef also mentioned in his slide. It's one of his slides contain the administration APIs, syndication API. So this also gives us flexibility and ability to interact with the Ontoserver in a way that we can further use it to our benefit. Next, how it is basically deployed in Cologne. I will just touch up here a little bit just to give you an overview. And in my third session, I will actually talk about it in detail. So there are two deployments that we have made in Cologne. So one is the central instance and the other one is the local instance. Local deployment is basically to facilitate our ETL routes internally that we are setting up for Medic. So this is, it helps us to test the new versions of the Ontoserver and basically see the capabilities and compatibility issues before we deploy the instance on the central one. So it gives us a working area or a deployment test bed, basically to test the new versions and capabilities. And the central instance is basically the one which currently is being used with the MII and initiative. So this was just a brief overview of this. But then we move on to interoperability. I'm sure all of you have heard about it. I know more detail about it because my background is now medical, so I cannot explain the interoperability from the medical point of view, but I can definitely give you an overview about how this plays a key role with the Ontoserver. So basically, interoperability is not just a buzzword anymore. it's now becoming a necessity. And we have seen it over the years that this idea of having so many healthcare systems which do not interact with one another on a common layer. So that's where we are. The interoperability plays a critical role because it ensures that different healthcare systems can communicate and exchange data seamlessly, yes, leading to improved patient care and reduce errors. And obviously, it helps with the efficiency also. Without interoperability, what happened or what's been happening is basically healthcare providers face like hospitals, clinicians, they face significant challenges in accessing and sharing patients' information, which obviously can hinder the timely and effective patient care. So that is the main reason for the interoperability. What is the role of Ontoserver here, right? So Ontoserver is basically as we mentioned, that it's a very powerful state-of-the-art terminology server. It basically does is it bridges the gap between healthcare systems by providing basically a fast and context-specific access to the clinical terminologies like SNOMED, LOINC, ICD, OPS codes. And what it does is it also enables healthcare, ensures that healthcare data is consistent and is interoperable across various platforms. And since it is a FHIR native terminology server, so it supports robust APIs, which enables seamless integrations, right? And it's making it a very useful tool in order to achieve interoperability. So this is what Ontoserver brings with its interoperability solution. Syndication, as Josef also mentioned earlier. What is syndication? Syndication is basically referring to the process of distributing and updating contents from a central source to the multiple endpoints. As you can see here in the diagram, we have a central instance, which in the syndication terminology, we call it an upstream server. And then we have downstream servers. Downstream servers can be in the same network infrastructure, or it can be not in the same infrastructure, like a separate client side. So in order to achieve syndication, there are certain configurations which will come down the next slides I will share. But what the job of upstream server is that it provides those code systems and value sets for the downstream servers to be able to sync and update on their downstream instance here. So that gives us the flexibility of having a synchronized and code systems and value sets to have similar operations. And also it gives the ability to the site, for example, if they don't have the technical skill set in order to handle all the terminology servers on their local instance. So it gives them a peace of mind that they can just do the syndication to the central instance, and they can use those terminologies locally to perform their day-to-day operations or do validations on their end. So this is basically the syndication part. And if we talk about it a little bit further, how Ontoserver uses syndication, that's pretty much, I think with the diagram explanation, I tried to explain. So what it does is it gives you terminology contents from the upstream server by having your local instance on your end on the client side. You set up a downstream server and then you configure your downstream server in order to pull ontologies, terminologies from the upstream server. Let's go to the next one. Key features of the Ontoserver. Syndication, basically it provides three main benefits or the features. It's the syndication API, importing and updating terminologies, configuring syndication feeds. So these are the three main features it provides us. So syndication API, basically, it allows you to connect to the upstream syndication feed, as we saw here. The upstream syndication feed, this is basically referring to. And then with the help of API, a downstream server can connect to the upstream server. And basically, it supports various file resources, binary indexes, making it easy to deploy and access latest terminologies from the upstream server. Importing and updating terminologies. What you can import contents from syndication sources using built-in syndication client, or this can also be configured at the startup. You can do a preload of these resources. So when you boot up your Ontoserver, at that time, the preload process will work and it will try to pull all the syndicated resources from the upstream server. So that's how also you can set it up. One way is to manually configure it. Because it is a manual process, you have to do it. Otherwise, you can do it in the preload of the Ontoserver. So sometimes preload is a decent option if you are not interested in having the latest indexing syndicated resources, which you know that your site don't need to have all the resources which are being used because you only focusing on specific code systems and value sets. So in that case, the preload option would be much suitable in order to just load them once and then just every time the Ontoserver will reboot, it will perform the preload. But keep in mind with this process, you won't have the latest updates, if any, were made to the other code systems and syndications were enabled on other value sets, because those will not be loaded because you did it earlier. And then if you want to get all those resources, then you have to switch to the manual process and do the syndication manually. This will also be shown in the demo later in the third session. I will talk about it, how one can do it manually. And then configuring syndication feeds, it's basically only done by administrators. So not everybody will be able to configure them because it's a server level config that you have to do manually on the server when you're setting it up. And it also requires authentications, authorization. So it's not like that you just click on the syndication and it will start the process. It requires multiple stages and steps involved in it. We briefly talked about it, why syndicate, what are the benefits. So basically it provides consistency and accuracy. It's basically reduced administrative overhead once set it up, then it's much easier. And it also enhances interoperability because it's a standard and same code system is spread across the upstreams and downstreams. So it's basically provide you the easy feature of having the standard code access to the standard access to the information. Next, what's the time? I'm running So the configuration, as I mentioned earlier, administrators have to do it. Who is configuring the server? So this is just a basic configuration. While you set up your Ontoserver, you have to perform such operations in this syndication XML file or the endpoint that you want to syndicate to. This is just an example of like if you have configured for local, then you can use the syndication XML file and just set it up once, and then every site will just have this preload option and they can do it. This is one way, and there are some features here, the security features. These has to be true in order to make sure that authentication and authorization is handled. This is very important. Next is the workflow, how you will basically enable the syndication and how you will access it. So as I mentioned here, that these security configurations are important, and this will be done by the IT admin on your Ontoserver. And these has to be disabled. So right now they are enabled. You have to disable the configurations in order to set up the syndication for workflow. Since it is not a day-to-day task, it's one-time task, so it's done before starting up the Ontoserver. So then you disable the Ontoserver, you upload the code system file or value set, whatever you want to do the syndication on, and then you have to enable or set the status for the syndication, right? Do you want to enable it or do you want to not enable it for the certain code systems? In this case, the example is we are referring to the SNOMED and LINK. So we have enabled the syndication for both of these. And then basically you, at the end, you always turn back the security on. So the authentication and authorization is being handled at the Ontoserver level also. Obviously, we have a key cloak and the further authentication and authorization mechanism for the central instance. But this is just on the very granular level of the server itself, how Ontoserver will handle it. And then
Adnan, there is a question from Maximilian Kurscheidt.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. My question would be, is it possible to configure an upstream Ontoserver also to or downstream Ontoserver to be also like an upstream Ontoserver? So if you have, for example, like local terminologies which are stored then on your local downstream server, could that also be distributed, for example, to an upstream server or to another terminology server?
So if I understood correct, you want the local instance to be upstream and the downstream server at the same time?
Yeah. Is that possible, or is that not integrated in that concept, and you would have multiple upstream servers, for example, and then a certain downstream server who gets these?
So as far as what we have discovered till now, you can either have an upstream server or a downstream server. Both features cannot be enabled at the same time on one server. I think, Joshua, if I explained it correct, this should be the what I have the understanding of the Ontoserver.
Well, I think to answer Max's question, this is not something that they have ever considered, that a downstream server is able to provide resources up to the server. I don't know why you wouldn't be able to do it using preloading. It just doesn't really strike me as a good idea. So by design, you can cascade syndication servers. So I would actually say that that what Adnan has just said is is not quite correct, because you could have like, for example, a consortium level server that redistributes the resources from our server and then also provides its own resources. Yeah, on the slide you had there, yeah, exactly. There's that's what the syndication levels mean. But by design, it's just a process that feeds resources down the chain, not up. It's based on atom feeds, so the downstream servers subscribe to those feeds, present them using their API. They merge them as well, but I don't think that there would really be a way or use even to feed resources up the chain. That is something that should require communication. So I would say that a sneaker net coupling between those levels is just fine.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, that's an information for me too. So yeah, the issues over the years that we encountered with the Ontoserver deployment and upgrades, these are the basic issues. We had some indexing broken down when we uploaded new code systems. It's mostly LOINC and SNOMED. Sometimes timeout errors. It's basically too much too many code systems and value sets on the server being accessed at the same time. Load balancing, sometimes the network bandwidth, it's also an issue. But those are like occasional issues that we encountered. Then there was syndication issues because we are behind the reverse proxy. So this was a big issue in the beginning, but now this has been fixed, and now syndication is not an issue anymore for the downstream servers. So I think I am on...
Perhaps Adnan, one comment on this other, so the last slide, regarding the timeout during syndication or general timeout. I think we had the situation, for example, for the central one, if a lot of requests are coming in to the central system, it makes sense, for example, to have local terminology server either, because then the request would go to the local one and not over the complete network. So in this case, it makes sense to avoid latency or something like this. Yeah, it makes sense anyway to have a local one, yeah, to not run over the central one, everything. So if it gets more and more and more, then the local Ontoserver would make sense in this case. Yeah.
Exactly. So this conclude my session for now, and then later part I will go over a little bit more detail about authentication, how one can access the central instance and how you can use it and what are the functions that are available over Ontoserver. This will be in the third session. I will actually explain. So any questions regarding Ontoserver? Just
Thank you, Adnan, for all the details administrating the Ontoserver. But I think time is the schedule is just in place. So session 3 and the talk of René and Adnan concerning onboarding, we can go on.
yeah, let me start.
Yeah, you can start, and then I will go to the organizational stuff, Adnan. So this is divided in two parts. It's the technical stuff and then an organizational stuff, because both are mentioned. And perhaps you can do the technical start. So this is the flow from the technical, and then we will switch to the organizational stuff.
yeah, let me go back to the same. It should be the deployment at Cologne, right?
Mhm.
So as I mentioned earlier, that we currently have two deployments, the local and the central instance. Local, as René just pointed out at the end, that we, for the performing all the read operations, translate operations, validation operations for our ETL routes and everything, we are basically using the local deployment and doing the syndication via central instance. So basically keeping the same code systems and same structure. It gives us flexibility and not put extra load from our operations on the central instance. So this basically do a little bit of load balancing. Let's talk about the mechanisms that are in place for our central instance. There are two main mechanisms that we are following at the moment. Currently, the first one is the pretty standard. It's the mutual TLS authorization, authentication and authorization via Gantt certificates. Previously, it was the DFN PKI. Most of you will be familiar with this. And now, since the DFN is replaced by Gantt certificate, so these are the services, the certificates we will be using to basically perform the authorization for the clients and the servers on our end. So this is the one way. And the second is the IP allowed list, which brings me to the point which is not our preferred way of doing things, because it has an overhead for the IT team that they have to then manually add those IP addresses and everything in the Ontoserver. But yes, we have this mechanism in case you are not an education institution, or you're not from basically a background where you can obtain the Gantt certificate. Then one of this option, the IP allowed list, we can basically add a dedicated or a static IP address of a server from where you will have access to the Ontoserver. And this gives you ability to access the services that we are hosting at our central instance. So yeah, there are two ways. Either you have the Gantt certificate, or we agree and we do the paperwork, administration part, where René will discuss, and we do the IP allowed list, and we add you to the list of IPs who can access, and we provide you instructions how you can access the central instance, because the endpoint is totally different. So it's an access usage or accessing the system is the standard way, but just that the endpoint would be different for you. This is a local architecture, which we don't need to go in detail because it does not concern the external clients. Here, as I mentioned, in case you have the Gantt certificate, then should be updated. Then this would be the infrastructure or the architecture that we will be following, how to provide you access to it. So this is how it is set up in our at our Cologne, the central instance. As you can see, is that we have a client machine who has the Gantt certificate. It's that user is authorized and it wants to access now the central server, and we provide them the detail about which endpoint they have to look up and how they can access it. So they send a request via HTTPS 443 to our proxy server, right? So basically from their proxy server, this is their proxy server on their end. And they send out the request via internet to our proxy endpoint, which is in the university network, since the central instance is hosted in the uni clinic, and clinic is not part of the Forschungs network. So initially we were not able to obtain the DFN certificate. So we had this workaround that we set up the reverse proxy in the uni network, where we were able to obtain the necessary credentials in order to perform the TLS termination or authorization. So here we have our reverse proxy currently set up. That's where we will receive the request by the Gantt certificate client, the client machine, or the server. And we will basically verify it over here and then provide access to the central instance. So it's all automated. It's just that you put the URL in the browser and that's it. Or in the Postman, it's not something like this, what is shown here, that it goes through all these processes on your browser. You just enter the URL and you get to the endpoint straight away. But on the back end, this is the process which is happening to give you access. And then
Stop. Adnan, perhaps Maximilian Kurscheidt has a question.
yes.
Thanks
Before
again.
changing.
Yeah, are you planning to introduce other certificates authorities, such as DD Trust, as well? Because in the MII we have a lot of new new DITs who don't necessarily have access to the GIANT certificate, and also the FTPG. So are you planning to introduce the DD Trust CA as well?
This is what actually we considered for the migration of the Ontoserver, because this is already planned. I think Joshua will further talk about how we can address all these scenarios once we set up the new Ontoserver, the SU-TermServ one. But I think it shouldn't be a problem in order to have all those authorities set up on the Ontoserver.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. We just haven't had the need to set up another PKI, and if someone needed that, then sure, we would be able to set that up as well.
Yeah.
And at least for FTPG, I think that shouldn't be a problem, because everyone's working at a uni and we don't really care if people are using personal certificates or organizational certificates. So as long as someone from the team is able to get the certificate, that is, for us at least, fine.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, this is just the technical part of it, how to convert your certificate and basically upload it to your browser and then access the endpoint that it's mentioned over here. This is our central instance endpoint where one can reach by providing the certificate that you receive. And then by providing the certificate to the browser, you will be able to access the central instance.
Perhaps one remark on this, Adnan, regarding the web page, the URL which is currently used. I think this will change in the next future. Everything is prepared and we are doing some updates there. So, but nevertheless, we will do a communication about this, that this will change.
Exactly. So this is the current URL, which will obviously change in future. And how to access as a client. These are the configurations that you have to do in your Nginx reverse proxy or Apache if you're using either of these. And then you will have to configure your Nginx in order to access the server as a client by providing your certificate via Nginx source proxy. Troubleshooting techniques. Big issue that you might encounter sometimes is if you are on Mac, Safari sometimes plays cat and mouse with the URL and the certificate, so you might encounter some issue. So far, a very consistent browser that we are fine with is Firefox. Chrome is okay. It has had few issues, but not something that it will break anything for you as a user. But preferred browser would be Firefox, Chrome, and then any other browser of choice where you can at least add a certificate in order to access the server. Another way, probably most of you are using some sort of a REST API client in order to access or do the translation or expansion of the code systems or to upload. So then you can also use Postman and upload the certificate to the Postman, and then you can perform all these operations rather than via browser. You can do it via Postman and do the get and get commands or all the operations that you want to do. So this is also one of the options, and I'm actually stealing the link from the Nubank team GitHub, put it over here. This is one implementation where if you are from the developer side and you want to develop some sort of tools or services for Ontoserver, then you can go definitely look check out this GitHub repository from Nubank team. They have pretty good tools to play around with the Ontoserver. Let's go to the part where I show you the interface itself. Let me stop this and bring up the screen where I can share here's my PowerPoint. Am I sharing the right screen, right?
Mm-hmm. Ontoserver 6.11.
Yes.
Supported resources.
So as I mentioned earlier, that's the endpoint, the central server Ontoserver. If I click here, just the endpoint itself, we will get an error because we did not specify any specific endpoint where we want to reach. So you will always have to mention where you want to go. So for this reason, if I go to file metadata, I'll end up on the main page for the Ontoserver. And from here, I can start browsing, going through. You notice that it did not ask me about the certificate, which I previously mentioned in step. The reason is I already opened this website here. So let's see if we can do something like this. I go to the private window and enter the same endpoint. Now it's asking me for the certificate. So this is how you will be, once you want to access the central instance, you have to have a certificate in order to access it. If I don't provide certificate, for example, I'm don't send certificate. So I end up on a page which is still not updated, where it gives you an information that you landed up on this page because you did not provide the certificate. So we cannot authenticate who you are and why you are accessing it. So that's where your access is terminated and you are no longer able to access it. So in case you have the certificate, I have to close this. Then you pick the certificate from the list that you have, like I do. So I will pick up the certificate, provide it, and I will land on the page where I will be able to see the Ontoserver. This is much pretty, I guess. Let's stay here for a little while. So currently, you can see we have the supported resources that the Ontoserver basically supports, and the operations that was mentioned earlier in session 1. So it provides validation, conversion, closure, and all these operations here, some of them. Now, if I click on the browse, I will be able to go to an interface, a shrimp browser. It's again confirming because I'm in the private mode. So I accept the license and I have to again provide the certificate. Also, you can set it up. Please remember and move on. Because it's loading all the resources and that's why it's doing it. I'm just showing you how it will look on your end if you do it this way. Otherwise, if I go back to my normal window, the browser window, I won't have to click multiple times. Okay. So here, as you can see, we have on the right side of the screen, we have all the code systems, a panel where it gives you an option to search specific terms and see and search for. Because I mentioned that the search is pretty quick, so anything you can put over here. I have no idea. Blood pressure. So it gives you option, and obviously you can expand it further. And it provides all the options for you. Technical people can understand it much better. The ECL, as one of the slide mentioned it. I don't want to go in detail over here. It's basically if you are creating your own queries, try to search the Ontoserver for specific term or specific terminology or specific condition, then you can use these queries and add multiple queries to it. Concept constraint or linked subquery or all these things you can add from here and perform a detailed search on the Ontoserver for specific term that you are interested in to find. I will show here the admin UI that is basically provides detail about what are the resources available on the Fire server at the moment. So currently, at this moment, we have 262 code systems. I can make modification to the basically here, add and select columns which I want to display. Publisher, purpose, tag, all these things I can add to the list here, and I will be able to see all the columns over here. You can also drag the headers and group them one by one over here. So you have a grouped view if you prefer that. But normally this provides an overview of all the resources we have. On the top, as you can see, we have value set, concept map, naming systems, structure definitions, and bundles. So if we have uploaded any bundles, those will be listed over here. Structure definitions, and you can customize the view to include 100 rows, and then you can see all the structure definitions, and same with the views. You can always make these changes. The second thing which I want to show here is I can let's go this way. I can also search if I have SNOMED on my central instance installed, right? So here, no. So like this, you will be able to see all the, I'm currently in the value set, sorry. Go to the work system. That makes it much easier. The view was not familiar. So right now, as you can see, in the syndication column, the syndication is enabled for all these different versions of the SNOMED CT. So as I mentioned in the slide, one of the slides, that Ontoserver can host up to multiple versions of the SNOMED line in the code system. And then it gives you flexibility. Let's say one of the term is no longer addressed in the new version, but you still have the details in the previous one. And if that version you have no longer access, you can use your downstream server to basically pull that from our upstream server on your local instance and perform all those operations on your end. So this is one of the main feature that we discussed earlier. Obviously, it won't show here. It's the upstream server. So that's how the yeah. So currently the Loink version that is running is the 2.73 on the central instance. And we can also have multiple versions of Loink also. It's the same procedure. And if you can see here, ICD, initially when we started uploading ICD code systems, we had the DIMD was providing along with the B form. So we have both of them here, DIMD and the B form URLs and the code systems for the ICD-10. And here in the URL, you can see that the top list, it is for the DIMD ICD-10, and then further we have the B form. So with the URL based, you can also do a query, combine the query that, okay, I want the B form ICD-10, look up some term in the Ontoserver and perform a search on it. And that way you will be able to access or do a query only on the B form rather than on the DIMD code systems. So this is also one of the features of it. And then turn on the indication for syndication for some code system that we want, one of our client want to basically have it on the local instance. We can simply turn on the syndication from here for that specific code system. And now they can basically have this code system on their local instance by pulling it via syndication API. So this is also pretty helpful via admin UI. Second thing, as I mentioned earlier.
So we have to speed up a little bit.
Yes, we are running out of time.
So many things. As I mentioned earlier, that you can also access it via the Postman. And then this is just an example of how you can access it via the Postman. It's a local instance I'm accessing at the moment, but you can always access the central instance by providing the credentials in the settings and to provide certificates for it. And then you will be able to access the central instance in the Postman easily and programmatically. If you want to do it via Python or via Java, you can go to the GitHub repository from Lubeck team, and they can basically show you the process, the steps involved in setting up your Java code or Python code, how you can configure it and access the central instance. for your analysis. And I think this should be all from my side at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah, and now René, it's
Yeah, I can take over. Please, can you unshare?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. So it's quite short from my side. So at the end of the day, we have talked about the technical stuff, but we need some organizational stuff either on this point, and therefore our webpage, the MRI-TermServ.de, there you can find a lot of information about this, and there we have some portions there where we can, or where you can stick in, for example, the onboarding itself. So some parts which we are doing in an onboarding workshop, typically if a site is coming along, though we have there some dates later on provided where an onboarding could be done, so that we can go through the details again, yeah, to get access and organize all the stuff. And there's good explanation. And if you go on the website later on, I can show you a shot if I'm clicking through. And there's another thing, what is required for this. Yeah, we need a contract about this. And because this is a prerequisite that we can start with the onboarding and the onboarding workshop. There in the same point, which you can see here, the access to the server, there's additional than an operations manual shown either on this page, so only not on the contract, but the operations manual either, so that you can see how the operations is done. In general, some descriptions are therein regarding shrimp, snapper. Then you can see how our service desk or support is working there. It's described there, and a little bit about the code systems. But if you stick on this the page regarding the code system itself on the web page, it's better because it's more up to date. This is something. Then we have some communication prepared. One thing is that we have this common email distribution list with team mail MRI-TermServ.de. There you can request help. So all our team is included there, so that you get the help there. Nevertheless, if the people are on vacation or not, so there are backups available for this. Yeah, and then it's possible that we can provide a SULIP chat, but if you have a look on the MRI-TermServ, that's described how to get in. Then I would like to mention something either is regarding the licenses itself of the terminology. So if you are signing the contract with us, there you have to take care for the terminologies itself from the BFARM. So if you click on this MRI-TermServ.de licenses, there you will see for each license type you want to use, what the conditions are there. Mainly it's there only that you have to register for this, yeah, that you're using this. And but it's a prerequisite either. And if you see the, it's in German, then Vereinbarung zur Nutzung der Dienste SU-TermServ, there's a chapter in if you want to activate the syndication, that these things has to be fulfilled, that the licenses are fine. And another point which I want to point out is earlier we talked about this. How does it work if new terminologies could be uploaded? There we have created a process, and on the same web page you can have a look on this. And if you later on can do it by yourself, this is the web page, MRI-TermServ. You get in here, a little bit description about this regarding emailing and the SULIP itself. And the second part you can see, it's unfortunately in German, but there's access to the server itself, which contains the license form and the.
Just a brief interruption. Everything is English as well. So we
okay,
translate
it's only
everything.
the.
There's a button on the top right, and everything is going to be English as well.
Joshua, you did a good job. So I have to switch it, and I've seen it only this. Okay, great. Yeah, so then it's fine. Yeah, if it's in English, and then you can go through all the points. I would in time regarding the time, because I think Joshua, you need additional time. You can click to this by your own. Yeah, have a look on this. There's a lot of documentation, additional available, and you can see all the contacts, how you can get in contact with us. Yeah, if you have any issues or if some questions are there, so please use this URL for the email address. Yeah, any questions on this? Nope. Then I would like to give it to, I think, Joshua, you're on the next, right?
Yeah, I don't think we are that much strapped for time because I don't think that I'll be needing the entire 30 minutes, well, 20 now. So I would like to talk about our redeployment strategy and the upcoming availability of the current KDS resources. As you might know, there is currently an update process for the KDS going on, where new versions become available as they are created by the KDS teams. And well, we have realized that the server that we currently run, using that for the future is not really tenable. So a bit of historic perspective. Our account server basically is the same server that was set up in the HiMate project, where everything started for us in this SU-TermServ project. I've actually heard the server being referred to by other people who don't know me that well as that server in Cologne, because people don't really seem to be aware that this is the same server that SU-TermServ provides. The URL doesn't really help in that regard. It doesn't really communicate our identity, I would say. And also because this is already quite an old server, the resources that are available have evolved organically over time in response to ad hoc requests. So the German expression for that would be historisch gewachsen, with all the negative connotations that people generally get from that expression. That leads to a state where there is little to no insight to customers, so you guys, about what resources are available on the server. But also for us, we don't really know who's responsible for resources, where do they come from, or where were they generated from, and so forth. So we have realized that there is an urgent need for redeployment, and we're taking this opportunity of the new KDS releases to do that. So our new deployment concept means that we will be deploying the server now on Ontoserver MRI termserv de/fire. The link is dead at this time because we're still in the process of doing that. But the technical setup, that's the easy part. The more complicated part, that's going to be the management of the resources that we will make available. And for that, we have defined a number of processes which are now quite a bit of work for us, of course, but once everything is set up, we have the hope that everything is going to be going much smoother in the future, that we'll be able to have clear processes to get resources on the server, to make transparent what's on there and so forth. So that means that we will no longer manage resources using ad hoc requests. Everything is going to be using Fire NPM packages without exception. And we have defined rigid quality assurance and quality control processes for the deployment of those new packages. That means that we will ensure the availability of all dependencies of the contained terminologies, and we'll also make sure that everything that is referred to in the profiles that are defined in the packages that we redistribute are also available. So while you can refer, for example, to a code system in a value set, there might also be a pattern in a file profile that refers to another terminology, and we make sure that we also capture those and make them available, not just what's in the value sets, code systems, concept maps, and so forth. I will be talking a bit more about the KDS because most people who are attending this call today are partners in the MRI. So that's probably what concerns us the most, but we aren't really exclusively for the MII. Other customers can request resources by providing those kinds of packages, but they are responsible for the maintenance, and that will be very transparent. because we are then using also this package-based deployment, we can basically ensure deterministic setup. So it will be very easy for us to react to strategic changes or stuff like that, to disasters, because it will be quite easy to set up a server exactly as the one before, because it's just going to be very clear where all resources come from. They have a clear identity, and then that will be much more sustainable for the future. And also because we're using those packages backed by GitLab repos, we will be transparent by design, and it also allows us this strategy to implement UIs so you all can get easier insights in what's actually on the server. So let me talk a bit about the Fire NPM packages. It was an independent specification, were very pragmatic, but was recently adopted as part of the Fire core specification as of release R5. NPM, those of you who are already working with the web or web development will know that acronym. It's Node Package Management. So it's basically just you take an internet standard or de facto standard and you make it Fire, as they did in the APIs, for example. And it has actually been in broad use in the past years, including within the MRI. So generally, packages are distributed using a registry, like Node would also use. Most commonly, it's registry.fire.org, but that's just a kind of front end for simplifier.net. And I think everyone who has been touching Fire at all, knows simplifier and has been on their website. So for example, this is the package from the KDS Person on the right-hand side in the current state. And as you can see, it's like a simple directory structure, which is distributed as a tarball. And in green, I have highlighted the terminological resources which concern us. And in blue, there's .index.json on package.json. That is metadata for the package that we will also be using to generate. I've shown everything else in gray because we are dealing with a terminology server and we don't really need to care about structure definitions, which are profiles and logical models. We don't care about search parameters at all, not about the IG and capability statement, and especially we don't really care about examples. So what we'll be doing is actually redistribute those packages in a format that we need and is fit to our requirements, because we will be doing quite a bit to the resources. We'll first add provenance information using the meta.tag element that is available for all Fire resources. We need to ensure that resource IDs do not clash across resources. And we'll also make sure that they are somewhat human understandable so that you can, for example, infer the scope of a value set from the ID, because that's going to be visible on the UIs and in the files and stuff like that. We need to make sure that all, for example, value sets expand. So we need to detect issues and fix them. Sometimes that are actually bugs in upstream to specifications. I've actually identified some bugs in the core specifications as part of that work. And of course, we will need to identify and then distribute the dependencies of all packages. As I said, we'll only be distributing the terminological content. We don't distribute profiles because those are already available from the upstream packages. And I think that's one of the more critical decisions, but it makes quite a lot of sense for everyone. We will actually be pulling out some resources from the original packages. So for example, the new version of KDS Person actually distributes the ICD-10 WHO, which is mandatory in Germany for the coding of mortality, so Todesursachenstatistik. And for example, in the Deutsche Basisprofile, there's also ATC. And we don't consider this a good thing to distribute, for example, the ICD-10 WHO in this Person package. So we will be distributing our own dependency packages, which then are quite a bit more comprehensive. So our ICD-10 WHO package will include all available ICD-10 WHO versions that have ever been distributed by BFARM. Same goes, for example, for ICD-10-GM. As you might know, it's updated yearly, and coding with the 2025 version will become mandatory on the 1st of January 2025, of course. So once ICD-10 GM 2025 becomes available, we will also be pushing an update for our ICD-10 GM package, and because we will be using that as a dependency, and the other packages that are requiring ICD-10 GM, everything will be current as much as possible. And that also allows us resources that become available as fire from the upstream to incorporate those. So you might know that the BFARM currently is in the balloting phase or balloting consolidation phase for the National Terminology Server, and they will be becoming the default distribution route for especially those German classifications, ICD-10-GM, OPS, ICDO, ICF. And once those become available as balloted file resources, we will, of course, be distributing those as well, instead of the resources that we currently have generated ourselves. We will be distributing the most current balloted versions of the packages, so not all Erweiterungsmodule are already out of the balloting phase. Some aren't even in the balloting phase yet. So, for example, Bildgebung, that's just very much work in progress. So we will not, for the time being, distribute those. If there is an urgent need for that, we will, of course, then also consider distributing those in ballot packages. And I should also mention that we will be looking at implementing a writable development server for especially the KDS teams in the future, but that's currently not really on the radar in the vicinity, at least. And some resources that we distribute will be generated from also authoritative sources using our own Babelfish tool, which is open source and currently under active development. I won't really be talking about that. If you're interested in that, there's also a page on our website that links to a presentation I held a few weeks ago. So the dependencies, I think, warrant a bit more discussion. This is a current snapshot of the German Basisprofile from our perspective. Those are the dependencies on a package level that I've identified in the Basisprofile. As you can see, it's not a monolithic package. There is quite a bit that's referred to from other resources, and it goes down quite a few levels. So that is something that we will be considering very closely, pay close attention to, and then make sure that everything is becoming available as we need it. And also, that is exactly what complicates this migration, because if you do something like this with a great degree of care, obviously it's going to take quite a bit of time. For our distribution architecture, I mentioned earlier that packages are generally distributed using simplifier. We can't really do that, not just because of licensing, but because we are redistributing packages that other people have developed. So we are using the GitLab package registry. What's nice for us is that it's actually free for public packages. But also there is a direct link between the packages and Git repos. So there is quite a bit that comes with that. So because we are using a Git-based workflow, we can work together with other people. There is simple tooling for us to generate those packages and distribute them. So we are very flexible, and we aren't dependent on other actors. GitLab is very stable, of course, and it has proven quite valuable, this deployment strategy. So as you can see, this is a current snapshot from, I think, Monday. There's already quite a bit of packages available. I'm very much busy doing those conversions, so there are a lot of packages that are still alpha versions or beta versions, but eventually those will become stable versions. And I should also mention that I'm using the version identifier of the upstream packages, but with the suffix for the alpha, beta, or release candidate stuff. I mentioned earlier that we are developing quality assurance and quality control algorithms, basically. For that, I've developed a set of Python scripts to ensure the integrity of a distribution and facilitate the metadata manipulation that we do. But I think the most important part of that for you guys is the dependency tracing that we've implemented. So as I said, we need to consider that all resources, for example, value sets that are referenced anywhere in the original package are available in our infrastructure. As I said, often there aren't really the value sets that are referenced by profile often aren't really available as files in the package because they come from other sources. So for example, a value set from the file core specification that obviously doesn't really belong in the package for KDS Person. So that needs to be identified. But also there are some mechanisms for file profiling, which basically disregard the use of value sets for value set bindings. So those also need to be identified. Also, we need to validate that there are no conflicts between packages. We need to ensure that all value sets expand. We need to be able to look up codes from the code systems. And of course, we have scripted everything in our upload scripts to ensure that that we don't make any mistakes here, basically. For that, we use an internal test server to test the upload of all packages. And also, we apply those provenance information tags to make the project and dataset context transparent on the resource level. And we are also, as René mentioned, working on a bit more insight into the licensing state of those resources. Obviously, we aren't legal experts, so generally we just refer to the text of license agreements on our website, but those license tags also applied to the resources. So you will be able to find information on that and then get your own impression of what the licensing state is. Yeah, Max, please.
Yeah, thanks. Just a short question because you mentioned that a lot of terminologies are published by the BfArM or by other authorities. And is there a plan that they also provide their packages, for example, through like an Ontoserver where you can then subscribe to? Or is it always like that mechanism that you basically pull it from their sources and then publish it on the TermServ Ontoserver?
So currently they're still in the balloting phase for the national terminology server, so they haven't really deployed a Fire API yet. But even if those packages became available as a node registry, we would still be using those resources to repackage them because we very much believe in those provenance information tags that we are now applying and our processes. So for us, it's just much easier to basically take those resources, redistribute them in the fashion that we need, and then it remains compatible in the process. But the resources are still going to be semantically identical to what BfArM provides. We don't really tamper with that.
Okay, thanks.
All right. And as I said earlier, I'll also be identifying bugs because it turns out if you look closely at terminology and you write scripts to validate stuff, you are bound to find errors because people just make errors. And that has been, I think, proven helpful to most specifiers as well. So yeah, as I said, we want to be as transparent as possible, and we want to make transparent what packages are already on the server. So there has recently been a new specification as part of FHIR working group, or HO7 working group, I should say, which is called the Canonical Resource Management Infrastructure Implementation Guide. It deals with the development and deployment lifecycle for resources with basically canonical URLs. So everything that is could be considered definitional resources rather than instances. And those obviously include terminological resources, so it's very relevant for us. The development stuff, that's not really of concern to us right now. Of course, for stuff like our Babelfish software, it might be interesting, and not everything from the IG is really applicable to us right now. But there are two aspects which are very much relevant. There is the publishing and the distribution side, which of course is interesting because we do exactly that. There is an extension for the scope of resources which says which NPM package they are from. We will be applying that extension to our resources as well. I still have to implement that, but that shouldn't really take a lot of time. So we can make transparent not just on the package level which resources are contained on the package, but also from the resource level where they are from and how they are maintained. I think that's very helpful. And also there is something that is very similar to Ontoserver syndication. It's a bit different, but we have implemented this atom profile that has been described in the CRMI specification. Excuse me, I just have to sneeze. Maybe not. So I might need to mute me on a very short notice. And we have implemented the simple, also open source, because everything we do is basically open source, API to implement this atom feed. So there's just an API where you can retrieve the CRMI feed and see what packages are available, and we'll also be able to manipulate it, authenticated, of course. And in our upload script, that is implemented in a way that where the CRMI feed is also updated automatically, so it remains current when we change packages on the resource level. All right, that's already my last slide. Currently, as I said, I'm still working on the KDS packages and the dependent packages. Some issues still need to be resolved. Some dependencies are still work in progress. And I'll also need to say that some resources will not be available at all because there hasn't really been an MRI-wide decision how to deal with that. The most pertinent issue, I think, there is PZN, Pharmazentralnummer, which people might know from medication. For us, currently, we just don't have access to that, so I won't be able to provide that, of course. I will say that we will be expecting a server deployment during this month of July. I'm working on that as much as I can, and we'll be coordinating with our partners in Cologne to facilitate this deployment as soon as possible. And then as new KDS releases become available, we also push updates. The new infrastructure, once it's set up and it's all done and tested, also allows us to be much more agile in terms of new releases and timely updates, and will also help us to reduce to basically get a bus factor, so it's not dependent so much on one person. And of course, we're also involved in the further development of the KDS packages and the other German dependencies, because there's not really that many people around to do that kind of stuff. So of course, there's going to be some personal unions. We're also looking at UI components for introspection for the available resources geared to our requirements. And we will, of course, be in close contact to the FTPG Plus team to ensure that our processes remain compatible with theirs, because they are, I would say, the most important partners that we have currently, because they're just so relevant for all the MRI does. But of course, we'll also always consider the requirements of the DITs. And if you have any questions regarding that, then of course, feel free to reach out. We're very happy always to help people and discuss stuff with you guys. And also, leading over to the next talk, we are working on the distribution scheme for local terminology servers, which is compatible with this process. So with that, I would like to hand over to our master student, Bettina, who's working on that. And then if you have any questions, I would like those to be held after Bettina's talk, if that's okay with you all. All right, so you should now see my screen again.
Okay, yes, thank you, Joshua. My topic is providing terminologies via the DSF. So as Joshua said, yes, next slide. I'm a master's student at the Institute of Medical Informatics in Lübeck. And the idea is to use the data sharing framework that was developed in Heilbronn to use in this work. And as a preparation, I was at the DSF Spring School in March 2024 in Heilbronn. I got an introduction to the DSF and learned how to build an own process plugin. Yes. Yes, the whole title is then developing a process plugin of the syndication algorithm for terminology resources for a distributed network at German university hospitals. Yes. So in the modern medical sector, an important goal, as probably you all know, is to enhance the use of electronic health data nationwide. And the challenges include several interoperability challenges like the synthetical and the semantic interoperability. The terminology servers are not present at every MAI location because it can be very complex and expensive to actually build them up and to have them maintained properly. And also the expertise regarding the terminology servers are not present at every location. And because new versions might be released all the time, it's important to keep it up to date. Otherwise, there can be problems with validating codes or translating codes or stuff like that. So the goal is to develop a system to make it easy and accessible for locations to keep terminology servers up to date. Yes. And the current structure, that's the figure that Joshua built, is the central terminology server with the SU-TermServ, and it's a hierarchical system for terminology servers. So there can be project-specific partners who refer to project-specific servers, and there are the several data integration centers. And yes, not every location actually needs a full Ontoserver or has the access to a full Ontoserver. So there can be smaller local implementations of terminology servers without all the functions. And also not every location needs all the terminology servers. Not every location needs every terminology. And the algorithm should then refer to instances to a higher level to servers to get a newer version of the terminologies. Yes. So the existing infrastructure for the technical solution is a data sharing framework. It's already installed at every data integration center, and then for the plugins, they just need to install for different use cases, which is quite easy. So applications can be added or removed as you like, and there can be as many or as little plugins as the location wants. And the developers can actually focus on the plugin and don't need to care about message flows, or security. Yes. Just a short introduction to the DSF. There are two main components, which is the business process engine and the file server. The business process engine, or BPE, is local and secure. It can access local data and resources. And the file server is then accessible to the outside, like a mailbox. The BPE communicates with the file server via HTTPS or WSS, and it can also communicate with file servers at other locations, for example, to start processes. Yes. The processes of the BPE are modeled via a graphical language, the BPMN. Yes. there are different elements like start events, tasks, gateways, and end events. Yes. The task can be user task. So when the user needs to decide something, and the service class can then actually execute Java classes when it's reached. So it's very easy to change like the order of the task without changing the whole implementation. The gateways are used based on a condition. Something happens, like an exclusive gateway based on a logical formula, or an event-based gateway, which waits if something happens, then in a certain time. Otherwise, there's a timeout. Additionally, there are message flows, like I said, from one process to another. For example, yes, messages are sent and then another process starts at another location. Yes. So the file server, as I said, it communicates with each other. That means that they send fire task resources to one another. The task include then a trigger parameter to, for example, start the process. And some of the fire resources that I personally used in the process of building the plugin is, of course, a structure definition. It's used to customize resources, for example, to slice elements. Then the activity definition, which defines which triggers are allowed at processes to certain roles or organization. Then the questionnaire response, which is a set of questions that the user needs to fill out and reference the questionnaire. The questionnaire actually defines the questions and rules and how to answer them. Yes. So I will go more into detail about actually the result, the syndication algorithm. Yes. So the start is at the Ontoserver. It's they're triggered and not at a data integration center. It can be triggered by a time or a special event. Yes. Then a list is created with the help of the SU-TermServ with the current versions and other metadata. Yes. The list is sent to the data integration center, or rather sent to every DIG. So yes, you can say it's sent or published or whatsoever. And then at the data integration center, the local list is created based on a local terminology server. And those are compared to the remote list. So both of the lists need to be somehow hierarchical and structured so that they can be properly compared to one another. The decisions can be based on rules or on user interaction. So for example, a rule can be accept all SNOMED CT updates and decline all the LOINC updates, for example, because they don't need it. Yes. And then it's sent back to the Ontoserver again. You search what the data integration center actually wants. And for example, yes, the data integration center can say that they want whole packages or special resources. So the Ontoserver then needs to look for them and, for example, expand value sets so that they can be sent back to the data integration center expanded. Yes, and then it's received at the data integration center and can be uploaded to a local terminology server that should follow the fire specification. In Lübeck, we have, for example, a small server called Termite that can be used for that. Yes. Now a little bit more technical, the actual implementation. This is the communda graph, or combination of 3 communda graphs, which are 3 processes, the Ontoserver process at the top, and at the bottom, 2 processes that are started at the data integration center. Yes, again, it's started at the Ontoserver. It's triggered by so you send a task resource to the Ontoserver or to the central server. The task resource includes, of course, the reference to the structure definition, to the activity definition, and then the name of the server that is triggered then. And the bottom, that is the most important part, the name of the message name, which reference the actual start event in the BPMN process. Yes. Yes, here the list is created. Yes, you see part of the list here. So it's structured that all the packages are displayed and all the content of each package is displayed. So you can view, you would select based on the ID, either a package or a certain resource if you want only one resource. Yes, you can also see that all of the versions are included in the list. The list is then sent to the data integration center. Yes. Yes, there it's analyzed, and then right now there's a user task, yes, which is basically a questionnaire and a questionnaire response, where I use the graphical interface of the data sharing framework, where it's simple, yes, what package or resource do you want, and then you put in the ID of the resource or package that you want. Yes, that is then sent back to the Ontoserver. There's actually an event-based gateway, yes. It waits for a certain time if a message is sent, or either then a timeout, or the message is received and then analyzed. Yes. There the elements are searched, and as said before, the value sets are expanded and then sent back to the dig. And actually this, yes, the sending is here, sending the elements are put on the file server, because the file server is accessible to the outside. You can just send a URL to the data integration center, where then based on the URL, you can download the elements from the Ontoserver or from the file server, from the DSF file server. That was used for the list at the beginning and also from the elements at the end. And one of the reasons was actually that is the list was too big to be just sent as part of the task resource, and as well as the elements at the end, they're just too big to be sent simply by the task resource. So yes, they're put on the file server. Yes. At the end, it's then uploaded to the local terminology server. As said before, right now a terminology server called Termite is used, but you should be able to change the local terminology server as you like, rather simply. Yes. So what is not ideal right now, or what can be included in the future? So first of all, as I presented in the idea of the algorithm, there should be somehow automatic decision making based on rules. For example, accept all the updates for Snowman CT. That is not done right now. Right now, it's a simple manual way to start this whole thing. Yes, it's right now a user task, so you manually type in the ID of the elements that you want. Also, as I said, the local terminology server should be exchangeable easily and support all the terminology servers that follow the FHIR specification. It should be easy right now. However, you need to go into the code quite deeply to change it, so that could be easier. And yes, there should also be different scenarios to start the algorithm. Right now it's very manually, so you trigger the whole thing by sending a curl request to the server with the task resource. And when we first talked about this whole thing, we actually defined 2 scenarios on how to start this, which the first one is a daily update. For example, at 6 p.m., the Ontoserver creates and publishes the new list with the latest versions. And for example, if the versions does not change between 2 days, the list is still published, and then the algorithm continues. And the other scenario is that a new data integration center yes, wants all the new versions. So at any time of the day, they add themselves to the Ontoserver and to the whole algorithm, and they do not want to wait until 6 p.m. They want right now to get the full list and then decide which resources they want. But actually, besides the first start, the rest of the algorithm is then yes, the same as the daily update. Yes, and the whole scenario could have actually a graphic interface. Right now, it's all based on the command line. The graphic interface could, yes, then have the option to select the central terminology server or select project-based servers, and then start the process. And in the background, actually, the whole curl requests are sent. And also then you could subscribe to certain terminologies as abos, and then also desubscribe as you like and add rules as to what updates you want to accept or decline. Yes. Thank you very much. And yes.
Yes, thank you very much, Bettina. Very interesting. Of course, it's very specific topic. I don't know if everybody understood everything. So if there are questions, they should now be discussed. As I said in the beginning, it comes from our discussions, let's say in the task force and at other meetings, that this kind of offline provision of resources by using the data sharing framework seems to be a very urgent topic. So I'm very happy that we started to have this opportunity as well. So.
Yeah, I just have 2 additions to what Bettina has presented. So the first clarification would be that Termite is a minimal terminology server that we are developing, which is geared towards the use case of DIGs not being able to deploy something more substantial, but we will try to address this use case in Termite as much as possible. So it's mainly geared towards validating valid value set membership, as far as I know. But there might be stuff that we support in the future, but it's not really high performance, and that's not what it's intended to be. If you need that, you will be required to buy your own terminology server or implement something on your own. But as long as it's FHIR compliant, it should be compatible with the process Bettina has deployed. And also, I'd like to mention that we don't expect that updates are occurring that often, but it's non-deterministic when they occur. So there's not really some scenario where the DITs would say, "Oh, we just do it once per quarter or once per year." That's not really sustainable. So the process requires that you check often, but most of the time it's not going to do anything because there aren't really any changes.
Yes, there are some questions. I don't know who was the first. Julian, would you want to start?
Sure. So my first question would be the packages that you distribute in one of the last steps that are sent onto the FHIR mailbox of the Ontoserver and then pulled from within all the DICs. does that mean that every single package is on the Fire mailbox of the Ontoserver at all times, or are they uploaded on the fly and then deleted again?
Right now, as I said, it's the first implementation. Actually, all of the packages would be on the Fire server. However, you could, of course, this is probably something for the future, that those who are not requested at that time could be deleted again.
Could be built on demand.
Yeah, I mean, the question is like, I'm just curious in general. I think it's not even the worst idea to put it on the Fire mailbox at all times, because, you know, it's accessible and then you don't have to upload, delete. I mean, I'm not necessarily sure that's necessary as such, because the only people who can really access it are the people who have the credentials anyway, you know, given that you can configure that via the DSF anyway. So I think that's actually a good way to do it. And then the other thing I didn't quite understand, so you said the packages that you are subscribing to essentially as a DIC has to be input manually as a task resource into your plugin, right? You said, like, so how do I subscribe to packages? And once I have to subscribe to a package as a DIC, does my system remember that I have subscribed to this, or do I have to trigger it every single time something else comes in? Like, does it keep a list of all the packages I have subscribed to at the moment?
So that's a part that is not implemented right now. So that would be for the future.
And so how does it work right now? So the current implementation.
Right now it's triggered manually. So right now I just start the process, and then at some point with the user task, yes, I just open the interface and put in a package ID.
I see.
Yes.
So that's a kind of like more like a proof of concept type of thing, because that's not something you could expect people to do every time, right? That they would start a user task and then every time, because that would mean that I would have to get a trigger and then I would have to look at it every time and say, I want these and these packages. So I'd have to kind of figure out which packages I want in the first place.
Yeah.
And so I would have to keep my own list, and then, okay, fair enough. And then that's in that user task at the moment, that's you can put in multiple packages that you're interested in that moment, or okay,
Yes.
so you can just copy paste your same list over and over again when you do it, basically.
Yeah, you could.
Okay.
Like if you put in a package, that means of course you get all the content of the package, but you could also just add a package and then also additionally this resource, and
one thing that
last
we might
question.
also consider is just having like a curated package. This is everything that we have right now, and you can subscribe to that, so that would fit neatly into that. It would just be a package without any content, just with dependencies, and because the process likely already considers dependencies. If not, we will need to have to look at that. That's just then a very easy way to say, yeah, we want everything.
I mean, I think what would be nice if you could essentially have a list that you can send once into you can configure once, and then you can update it.
Yeah, like a starter package, something like that.
Yeah, like that. And then if you can change it for yourself, and the DSF would keep that list in the file server, and you can, with a post, you can update that list, that everything you subscribe to, and then the MEE could also publish a list that people could then download and put into their list that they are subscribing to. I think that would probably be a neat method of doing it. One last question, then I'll leave you guys alone. Is how are you guys planning to distribute the whole thing? Is it going to be accessible on GitHub for everyone, or what's your plan in that direction?
So right now my stuff is on GitHub. And yes, Joshua?
Yeah, we love open source, so of course it will be available, and it needs to be for the DSF plugin stuff. So we're planning to just use the same DSF architecture that most or all DITs, I think, already have. We need to set something up on our side as well. Of course, we as SU-TermServ currently don't have a DIT. A DSF. That's what I meant. But the plugin that will, of course, be open source, and then
what might be worth considering is to put it under the Medical Informatics Initiative, because we have all the other plugins there as well. Just something you can think about, maybe. it's easier for us to kind of keep track of these things, because I think most likely if this is going to work, most DITs will install this in one form or another. So
yeah, so we are actually big fans of GitLab here, because it's just so much that you get for free compared to GitHub, especially with the package registry. So I'm not entirely sure if we want to go ahead with putting that on GitHub and then everything else on GitLab. But at the end of the day, I don't really care so much where it is located. We can also have like a point in our GitLab repo. So yeah, of course, we can make that as public as possible.
okay, all right.
And Max was next, I think, if you're done, Julian.
Yeah, thanks. My question would go into which terminology artifacts are you supporting in the moment? And the second question would be, is it possible that you could also distribute like structured definitions of the core data set, for example, through your process plugin which you developed?
So generally, I think everything that the DSF supports, my plugin supports. So structural definitions can be distributed, or not right now, but I could add it easily that it could happen. So right now it's only value sets, code system, and concept maps, and the packages. Yes. Does this answer your
Thanks.
question?
Yes, the next one is Reto.
Hi, everyone. And thanks for the nice presentation. I'm really happy to see that DSF is used for further use cases. I have just one question, or maybe just one comment. As you said, authentication and authorization is something that the DSF takes care of between all the members in the network. Another important part there is a trust of content when you share different packages, for example. So if a DIC is downloading a package from the SU-TermServ DSF, did you think already about some way to enable trust of the content that you download, and to check that the content of the downloaded packages, if there are just a certain type of resources in it, just a certain type of content, to check whether there is, for example, a binary resource integrating some type of JavaScript elements, or so that, because if you download something from SU-TermServ and then insert it into your own server, which is located behind the firewall in a university hospital, you need somehow trust that what you execute against the server, even if it's just a package of terminologies, that it just contains the content that the provider of this content actually tells you that there is inside of this bundle that he provides. So this is, I guess, one of a very important topic if I want to use this DSF process to insert new terminologies into my own terminology server, for example, now in Heidelberg.
Yes, it might be possible to add some kind of checksum or hashtag hash sum or whatever to guarantee that the content is transferred trustfully. Yes.
Yeah, that's
Not
just integrity, I think. I think what Reto is referring to is basically how we want to ensure that that no malicious actors. It's an interesting question that we haven't really discussed yet. And I have to think about that. Just adding a checksum doesn't really add anything beyond ensuring that the packages from our GitLab are the same that are distributed over the DSF, because we also might want to distribute expansions. I don't think that would be helpful at all. So what we could obviously do is just having like a check process in the DSF plugin at the side of the DIG, which evaluates some kinds of rules which make sure that especially there is no, as you said, JavaScript in the narrative. That's where would be inserted into. I think that would be easy to do, but for the other stuff, I think if you have any ideas about that, I would be very happy for them, for you to share them. because that's just something that we haven't thought about yet, and I'm not really familiar with the DSF.
I'm interested in it as well, because it's, I guess, one of the problems that we have for all data transfers that come along with the DSF. It's a different kind of trust that we need to enable if we communicate out of the DITs to a central repository or a data management side, but it's a totally different type of trust that we need to enable if something comes from the outside into a DIC and the university hospital. Electronic signatures, of course, would be, I guess, one possibility to integrate, but then you have you need to transfer the keys maybe to check the signature. It's a big topic, so I just wanted to ask if you maybe have some ideas, because we are thinking about that as well in the DSF, how we can enable more trust between two communication partners.
So if there aren't really any other questions from the other people in the audience, I think it would be very interesting to discuss this a bit further. Max, because you're also a DSF guy, it might be regarding that, right? Or is it a different question?
I think that's like an interesting aspect, because if you take that from you also have that problem when you're having the syndication mechanism of the Ontoservers, where you also provide packages and value sets and all these artifacts and distribute them more or less automatically to other Ontoservers and maybe other terminology servers, which then are inside the DIT. So I think that could be like a really valuable thing that we start discussing that as well from the DSF perspective, but also from the other perspectives. And I think that will also involve like the FTPG and others who are distributing scripts, distributing things that then needs to be run in like an internal network. But I don't have like a solution yet for that. But thanks, Reto, for asking that really, really important question.
Yeah, it's a great point. Because we are dealing with hospitals, and hospitals are always very careful, and that's a very good thing. Because we don't really want people to do stuff on our architecture. So what I'm thinking about is once people assign their DSF instance the respective role, that would mean that they are subscribed to the plugin feed, I should call it. They have already said that they trust the process, I think, by subscribing to this role, or assigning the role. There is already a trust relationship that they have entered into, and at least because the DSF is based on the PKI authorization and the allow list, I think the DITSs can be reasonably sure that our endpoint is what puts resources on the server. So I think that is already addressed, but then we will have to consider the integrity of the resources themselves, as well as the non-maliciousness, which I think are very different things. So it shouldn't really be possible in the DSF structure, but you guys are the expert, Reto and Max, of course, to tamper with the resources in flight. I think an actor which is able to do that is a much bigger problem anyways, that we would have to consider in your threat model. So the most important part would be ensuring the non-maliciousness of the resources, I would say. And for that, I don't think that cryptographic signatures or stuff like that is all that helpful, because you can certify that a resource is the same that it was, but it can still be malicious. So I think for this use case, that is where we have to put the most attention to.
I think for you're right from that perspective, but I think that if to make sure that resources didn't change or they are signed by you because you changed them as like the provider of the terminologies and of the artifacts. That could be just like, okay, I can check if they got changed in between. But if you didn't provide them and someone else changed them because they got access, for example, to your terminology server and put some malicious artifacts there, then that would show up in when you have like the signed resources. Or if you can like check them at the location if they haven't changed in between. So I think that could at least provide a bit of trust in that regard. But in the end, I think we always need a little bit of trust that you are doing your job correctly and you don't put some code there which is malicious.
Yeah. So one thing that should not be all that hard is just to sign everything that is put on the server using some kind of detached signature, because if you say that we want to ensure that people don't put malicious resources on our server, that means that we can't really sign those resources on the server that we distribute them, because we would have to assume that if people are able to put resources there, the integrity of the server is already compromised, I would say. It might be a valid assumption at least. So I guess we could engineer some kind of detached signature that we do locally on our machines and then apply that to the resources. But it's a hard problem to be sure, yeah.
Yeah, I have maybe another question for Bettina, which just jumped into my mind. Which kind of role did you use for the Ontoserver or like terminology server distributor? And the question would be because Köln has like an DSF instance already running, if they could use their DITS instance for basically providing the plug, like deploying the plugin and providing the terminologies as like the terminology provider, or if you're need to set up like an own DSF instance that is basically maybe located somewhere else, which has like purely the role of distributing terminologies.
That is a good question. Right now I didn't really think about it, and actually right now the plugin is built so that every person who has the plugin can provide, and also every instance that has the plugin can act as this data integration center and can act as a distributor. So I didn't really differentiate between those two. And the roles, I don't think I really worked with that, just what worked right now, because right now, of course, it works in the test environment that we used in the DSF Spring School.
Okay.
Yeah, perhaps we can discuss it, Bettina and Joshua, in the next team meeting which we have, and how we will set up. Because I think this has probably something with load to do later on, and I don't know what the impacts are and where we have to take care for.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
I would say that the DSF instance that we will be using for this process will be located somewhere in the Cologne infrastructure. It might not be, I don't really know yet. And it just strikes me as a good opportunity for separation of concerns that you guys have one DSF instance for the DIG, and then
Maybe.
another unrelated instance for the SU-TermServ projects. It sounds cleaner to me at least, but if it was feasible at the Cologne site and you all felt that would be easier to deploy, then I would be personally fine with.
But it's a really good use case.
Yeah.
And
Definitively.
you know, we are here from the DSF community as well. So if you have questions in that regard, or also in how to like take that plugin in like the test infrastructure, deploy it there, test it with a few locations, I think that would be like the next step. So definitely hit us up for that.
Definitely, that's a good option. We can further test it with few sites. Yeah.
Okay, but I would like to add that independent of all these technical issues, there are still the critical aspects with the content, as Joshua said, and we might have a little bit more discussions with the core data teams, like medication or others, because it's not a good idea that some group defines completely a fire package or fire profiles, and then independently our group or Joshua tries to make sense of it and tries to collect all resources to get them to have ideas how to interpret this and that. We have to work close together, not always, but if necessary, close together with those guys who are the expert for that field. So that is something that we want to do in the near future as well. Because at the end users want to have value set and code systems that make sense and that are valid. Yes, okay, are there other questions? We still have some time.
Maybe one question in general is, what's the timeline? I know people always don't like those questions, but when do you guys think we can actually pilot it for the first DICs, or when can we roll it out potentially? Because I think it is quite relevant, and even also relevant for stuff like, you know, verifying at sites with data extraction and selection. So the question is, when do you think you will have a first version that we could roll out to DICs?
First version of this data sharing.
Yeah, like at a level where we feel comfortable, like also now after these discussions with the whole verification process and everything, you know, when would we feel comfortable to roll it out, that we can, you know, guarantee a certain level of security, essentially?
A first implementation is ready, but as you have heard, or if we have discussed, there's of course a difference between a master thesis and a level of implementation that respects all these aspects surrounding this pure implementation, security and whatever. I'm not sure how much it takes to have a level of implementation that is secure and can.
Yeah, perhaps Josef, we can take this with us, because here we have to do the update to the new version, the new URL. I think this is from the priority point of view the first thing which we have to do, and then we can provide a timeline about this, how it should be, because I think it depends a little bit on the implementation either, how we will do this, and therefore what we have to set up, especially if we differentiate this or put it together. So this has to be decided upfront. So this would be a point with our next team meeting, which we can discuss, to provide a timeline when we think this can come out.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, so in terms of the master's thesis, that's going to be done this year, but in terms of deployment, it's really hard to give a perspective right now, because as you are well aware, there are very urgent stuff that we,
you
those
guys
of
are
us who are paid through the project are currently working on.
Jenny, who's going to be working on it? Is that so? Because obviously it's a master's. Are you guys taking over? So Joshua, you and who's going to be implementing it in general? Have you
Yeah,
guys
that
already
seems
decided
likely.
these two? Okay.
We haven't really decided, but yeah, that seems likely, I would say.
You may know Paul Behrendt, who was also involved in FTP Plus. Maybe such guys that are already a little bit involved. But of course, we need persons.
Yeah, the usual problem.
Yeah.
Someone has to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but that's fine. It's just about having a rough timeline, and then we can adjust as well. Because obviously, I think what we have figured is that for the data selection and extraction, once we want to actually check and validate against the CDS locally, it's not feasible until this is done. So we would have to say validation at this stage is not possible. You know, and people would have to try whatever we generate. Generates valid CDS, which we can kind of guarantee, but obviously it would be nice at some point next year then, I guess, to validate against the CDS with the local terminology that has been federated. But
yeah, at some point next year sounds good to me.
Yeah, I wouldn't really expect it to be much faster, to be honest. I know what you got, so it's you know, we shouldn't promise stuff we can't keep. So
yeah, absolutely.
let's aim for sometime next year. Yeah. All right.
Okay. I think if there are no more questions, we should not stay here. And I would like to, if you are fine with it, I would like to finish this workshop and to thank everybody who contributed, and also the very nice discussions we had. Thank you very much.